Welcome back to one of our Corona updates and what's going on. This episode is about dealing with spiritual and psychological distress during the pandemic. The CDC and Johns Hopkins data confirmed today that there is over 5 million infected in the whole world. 1.5 million of those are in the States, with over 93,000 dead. While there was some drop for 2 weeks, this week, the last week of May, seems to be a bit of a rise in the number of cases again. It's unclear if reopening the states, reopening the beaches, will allow for more cases. But how do we deal with the spiritual and psychological distress? The graph you are seeing now is showing how much the income of the families affected in the United States, mainly for the mid and low wages workers. You can see that 29% only are working as usual, 21% permanently laid off, 20% temporarily laid off, and 30% their hours were minimized. This graph shows you that the income of the families had severely reduced in about 35% of the families, moderately affected in another 30%. This particular circular graph showed you that although the financial stimulus that was sent by the government to most mid and low earned wages families, over 90% still did not get the full stimulus, although they are eligible for it. These three graphs lend themselves to this particular one. As you can see, if you look at February or beginning of March, the psychological stress were almost zero or 100%. There is a well-being among families. But if you look at end of March, which was the worst time of the pandemic, there is a marked drop on the psychological being and the mental health of the families, almost by 35 points. This is not only for the families, but more so for the children, the teenagers, and the young people at home. There is a significant drop, or increase rather, in their psychological distress or decrease in psychological well-being. The people who are finishing high school and those who are freshmen in colleges are worried about financial aid. Actually, over 44% of those who are applying for colleges are worried that they may not get financial aid because of COVID-19 stress on the country. Now let me get deeper into the psychological well-being. In the Time magazine, late April, published a very interesting article. We are really on edge as the coronavirus disrupts family life. Teens are working on adult responsibilities. Very well written article, and basically it explains that many of our teenagers at home are now taking care of many things. Taking care of their little brothers or sisters, taking care of elderly people, of their feeding or cleaning or walking, taking care of sometimes electronics of the whole family. So they are working at a higher rank. In the Guardian magazine, the most stressful time ever, how coronavirus affects our children's mental health. And this article describes very well the increased depression among teenagers while they are in social distancing. New York Times published a very interesting article helping teens make room for uncomfortable emotions. And basically the article describes that our teenagers are going through a very uncomfortable time. Their emotions are going back and forth between very good mood to very poor mood, and we need to help them to make room for them. This particular study looked at various categories of ages as well as levels of income and how that will severely affected or partially affected. And you can see that those are 24 years of age and under are severely affected. Almost a third of them, 33% of them, were markedly distressed by the pandemic. Not only that, our marriages are affected. In the Rolling Stone, there was an article speaking about breakups, and people are threatening to leave each other. United Nations published this particular unique article where coronavirus depression among teenagers and young adults could result in major number of fatalities, can be counted in the thousands of children this year. The girl that you are seeing now is a young girl who is 14 years of age. On April 12 this year, committed suicide in Los Angeles. Her mother could not remember that her daughter was really showing clear signs of depression. This picture that you see now is a picture of a 49-year-old emergency room physician who, after she has been taking care of a lot of cases of COVID-19, she decided to kill herself. What are the psychological reasons for people to commit suicide so we can be avoiding them? The first and important one is social distancing. Many articles start to accumulate now that teenagers, young adults, their life is with socialization, with their peers, with their friends. Social distancing is something that's so foreign to them, to the extent if that happens, unfortunately they go through major depression, major anxiety. Also, economic stresses. I have shown you through the multiple slides that the families are strained about the money. Dads and moms are not going to work. Many of them are laid off. The stimulus did not arrive on time. So kids now are so strained because they know their parents cannot offer them the toys, the clothes, the outings, and all of a sudden that can affect many of the members of the family. Not just the young, but also the adults. Because the dad feels bad that he cannot provide. The dad goes into depression because he is going always fighting with his wife because he doesn't know how to provide in the middle of the pandemic. Also, across the board, there is lack or reduction of religious support. While I applaud the Coptic Orthodox Church who raised to the occasion and were able to support all their congregation through Zoom meetings, I can't say that that's across every state and every church and every ethnicity or religious denomination. So many people who go to church for religious support or meet their priest because of religious support, now they are deprived of that. And unfortunately that affects their morals and that can cause them to have depression. The loss of meeting with friends, the loss of attending sports events, the loss of games and going out for games, all of that is very frustrating. Each one of those was an event that a young man or a woman was looking forward to look for fulfillment, that she is running the race, or he is going in a basketball game, or he's playing hockey or lacrosse or whatever. When all of that are closed, tell you what, depression is the only thing open now. One of the other things that unfortunately can lead people into more depression, more psychological distress, is the absence to clear mental health professionals. Many of the psychologists and psychiatrist offices are closed. And even if they are open, they only work through a Zoom. So the bond that happens between the behavioral doctor and the sick person is lost when it's very important. And all of a sudden, either that depressed people do not go to get help, or actually they attend these Zoom meetings, but they are not getting much help. Then the news. The news is one of the most annoying things happening to all of us. We only hear depressing news. We only hear of numbers. We only hear of events that's being canceled. And that can be very detrimental to our psychological well-being. How about spiritual effects? How did the pandemic affected our spiritual life? I think the first thing when we hear God is angry, which was sort of came upon by many of the preachers, that God must be angry. Whether that's right or wrong, I'm not going to go through this issue here, but God is angry makes us worried. How can I make him happy? When is he going to be happy? Is he going to accept us back? The issue about maybe God has forgotten about us. We have been praying, we have been attending Zoom meetings, we have been doing liturgies, we have been doing many things spiritually, but nothing is happening. So a lot of depressing attitude is happening within our spiritual lives, because is God really listening? Is God really even caring about what's happening to us? And then we don't have churches with the way we always want it. Yes, there is minor here and there openings with very few numbers here and there, but the real church as liturgical meeting, as a people fellowship, unfortunately does not exist anymore, at least for now. And all of a sudden, the absence of the churches deprive us from something we all took it for granted. We used to come to the church and think it's our right, and all of a sudden it's not there. So we start getting worried, getting depressed, and the spiritual life goes down, because when I see some people praying next to me, I pray. When I see people bowing down, I bow down. When I see people worshiping, I worship, and so forth. But now, there are no fellowships. Again, there are no service or servants. So people are not able to serve in the physical sense we are used to. Visitations, meeting in a Sunday school, see who is really sick, who is really in need of something, who is depressed to talk to. Now, when we don't meet physically, we lose that bond. And when we lose that bond, many of us who depend on their servants, unfortunately, miss that area. I think one of the major deleterious effects on our spiritual life in the pandemic is no Eucharist, no body and blood, no communion. Maybe it's good that we finally feel the value, but at the end of the day, it was the bread of life. I am used to it since I was a little kid. If I don't get communion, I'm missing something. So the communion to me was my life. And all of a sudden, I'm missing that. I know how to do without. Unfortunately, the spiritual life can also deteriorate during this time, because there are no friends. And the friends not only good for socialization, but they support each other. And when we don't have support, we lose something very strong. So the next point is, what are the psychological effects on the teenagers and young adults? One of the things that psychologists are now describing is increased depression. While depression and a child should not come together, a child is a joyful creature, many teenagers are pathologically depressed. They want to sleep all the time. They don't want to wake up. And when they wake up, they want to be alone. They cry without a reason. Some of them, because they haven't gone to a haircut or salon, they don't want to show themselves in a Zoom. So even if Zoom or any virtual meeting was a venue for us to meet each other, some of the teenagers isolate themselves even further for fear of their own self-image that doesn't profess very good. The isolation among our teenagers, it's as bad as for adults. For adults, as we heard, it really deprives us from friendship, deprives us from checking on each other, deprives us from work, deprives us from going out, deprives us from many things. But for a child, it deprives him from his life. Many teenagers, their life is outing, is going out, is going to the park, even going to school. Although it used to be hated before, now they wish they have even one day of school a week. They will look forward to it. Now the isolation results in major depression. And with the depression and anxiety for fear of infection, for fear of dad losing his job, for fear of getting my grandmother infected and may not make it, fear for the future, fear of when are we going to open, when are we going to go out, can I go to the beach, can I meet my friends, are we going to summer camp, and all these questions making our young adults and young ladies are anxious. One of the manifestations of psychological distress on our young people is anger and violence. They start getting angry at each other and maybe angry at their parents, shouting at them, maybe showing signs that they have never shown. And unfortunately, parents are not tuned to this, so they act even violently, and they may be punishing them and putting them in a more lockdown, more than the lockdown they are in, more isolation than the isolation they are in. And all of a sudden, a vicious circle happens. The kid is fighting with his brother, and the mom comes and hit both, and the dad comes and take the two kids and put them in a room, and all of a sudden, we have a more violent atmosphere. What is that happening from? From the anxiety and depression that's happening due to isolation. As I told you in the article published by the Time magazine, many of the young ladies and young adults at home are working like real adults, taking care of food, taking care of young kids, taking care of grandma and granddad, and all of a sudden, their life all of a sudden have changed from a person who's supposed to enjoy life to a person who has so many responsibilities. The long time on the screen, whether it's iPad or iPhone or Xbox or whatever, long time on the screen have resulted in many things. One of them is physical. People are eating things that usually give them obesity because they are sitting down all the time and eating while they are playing on the screen. Second, their eyesight eventually will deteriorate. Third, they get spine problems because they are hunched. They are looking down on a screen. And plus, we don't know how much wrong things they may be watching after the time mom and dad are not awake anymore. The lack of ability to buy things can cause depression and anxiety. Although shopping to some people is not important, shopping to many of the young adults is a fun thing, is something to release tension. Whether you buy a gum or you buy a sneaker or you buy a blouse, but all of that are not there. And all of a sudden, we found all the tension is boiling at home. Combating and dealing with psychological and spiritual distress during pandemic. What I'm showing you now is what we call a Google trend. And when you look at Google trend for the word prayer, and Google is basically looking how many millions of people looking at one word across the world, in this particular graph 150 countries, you can see that the word prayer was searched in Google between mid-March till the end of March, maybe 10-fold increase, marked increase for people looking for the word prayer. The other Google trend is about if God is in control. And you can see a major jump during the latter weeks of March, how many people are looking that God is in charge. Also, may God have mercy. This jumped during the third week of April to a dramatic level that Google has not seen before. This graph shows you that there is a change among the Americans, and basically it shows you that 55% of the Americans are now praying using some sort of electronics, and they are asking God to end the pandemic. What do we need to do during the isolation to avoid further deterioration of psychological distress? To ask the youth to do something, I think the first thing is to ask the parents. Please offer less news. Do not put the news all along, the whole day, and you move from CNN to NBC to this to that, and every single channel is basically saying the same. Less news means less anxiety, less depression, less tension. Do things together as a family. I like very much something I read called the flexible routine. Whenever you wake up until you end the day, make a program, but don't be rigid about it. Every 2 to 3 hours, you change the routine. You can say from this time to this time, the 2 kids will do breakfast for the whole family. And another time there will be a cooking class. One of you will watch it from YouTube and learn something new. Maybe another time will be walking together or biking. Maybe a third time will be painting a room or fixing something or playing a non-computer game like a Lego or something like that. Please appreciate and understand the frustration of your children. Not because they are depressed and sometimes violent, you should react in a violent way. Please appreciate their violence is secondary to frustration. One of the things a family can do together is watch a movie together, and maybe one of you can comment on Christian values from that movie. Even if it's a secular or Disney movie, every movie you can find something that can give you a Christian value, at least most of them. In my opinion, if parents do not try hardest during pandemic to become friends with their kids, then don't ask after this period why my kids are not spending time with me. God have locked you all together for you to have friendship together with each other. You must learn to be a friend to your daughter or to your son. They are captive audience. Do something about it. Play with them, paint with them, draw with them, walk with them, work out with them, cook with them, but do something to grow in their relationships with each other. What about young people? What can they do? One of the things they can do is a book club. Choose a book for them, electronic or version or any book, send it to all their friends, make a Zoom meeting for your friends or Google Team or Google Hangout, whatever you guys like, and get all the friends and talk about a chapter in that book. Another way is paint or plant, or even learn how to dye old clothes, like get one of your old t-shirts or old tablecloth and get a red bottle and a blue and painting and try to mix them, so to come back with something very artistic. It will take time, it will make you work with others. I'm talking to my young people. Feeling upset, depressed, tense is not abnormal, and we understand how you feel, and that's why COIC is trying to do many of these meetings, because we want you to be engaged during this time. I ask all my young people to divide all their issues in life between 2 things, 2 pots, 2 baskets. Things you can change and things you have to live with because they will never be changed. And don't keep hitting your head trying to change this basket. work only on the things you can change. If you cannot change social distancing, work something during it. If you cannot change how many weeks until the virus stops, how do you plan to use this time to get yourself educated? And speaking of education, one of the things can be done is learning a new language, a new hobby, a new habit. Some of the other things that to help our spiritual growth during this time, attend the liturgy together. Now no one is watching you. It's only you and your family or parents and kids. Now show your kids that you are a model of prayer. And you kids watch how your parents pray. We are not watching a movie. We are actually praying, even if we are not in front of the altar. We are now in front of the home altar. Pray alone and pray with the group. Make meetings with the Sunday school classmates in any type of virtual platform. The other things that can be done, learn something new like music, like Spanish, Russian, French languages. Be creative in taking old things and use them to make something new. And I'll show you this picture that you show now, where people used dried roses to make something very beautiful, or making a greeting card. One of the things I found I like to tell my young people to do, have a dream of what job you would love to do. Let's say you want to be an astronaut, you want to go into Mars. And I want you to read as much as you can about it and make a big project and submit it to us at CYC. Maybe one day we can make you present it. But even if you don't present it, you will benefit. If you want to explore something called speech therapist and you don't know much about it, occupational therapist, respiratory therapist, mechanical engineer, chemical engineer, anything, just explore the job, read much about it, write it, love it or hate it, and then look for another job. I'll tell you another good thing you can do. Go and visit countries. Look for any name of a country you want to visit and use Google Earth and go down into the streets and see the major attractions of Budapest and London and Paris and Sydney and every single place you want to visit, and make every day as if it's a new visit. I want to conclude by saying, this pandemic is going to finish. Trust me, don't be scared. Things are going to get better. We have to follow the rules. We have to live with the rules. We may be going out, but please wear your masks, stay distant, don't mingle with a lot of people. But in the same time, trust in God. God is the Almighty, the Pantocrator. Nothing can happen without His permission. Nothing can happen without His permission. 2, trust that God loves you so much, even a hair of your head is important to Him. You think all your life is not important? 3, continue doing what you need to do to build your spiritual life. In prayers, in Igbeya, in liturgies, in Bible, continue doing this, because the more you grow now, you will lead into repentance, which is the outcome of any trouble that comes upon us. Finally, don't hide your depression away. Come and talk to people. Talk to a friend. Talk to a servant on the phone. Call your priest and tell him, Abuna, I am so sad, I'm so depressed, I need to talk to someone. Write to us. Do anything, but don't stay alone, crying out of your depression. Trust me, things are going to get better. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope to see you very soon. Stay safe.